There's something profoundly beautiful about the concept of freedom. We all long for it in different ways. Freedom from worry, freedom from past mistakes, freedom from the chains that hold us back from becoming who we're meant to be. But true freedom, the kind that transforms us from the inside out, comes from a source beyond ourselves. It comes from God. When God sets you free, something miraculous happens. The shackles that once bound you, whether they're chains of fear, guilt, addiction, or shame, suddenly lose their power. They can't hold you anymore because you've been released by the ultimate authority. This isn't just a temporary relief or a momentary escape. It's a complete transformation that changes everything about how you live, think, and see yourself. This is a story about what happens when divine freedom meets human bondage, and why the liberty that God offers is unlike anything else in this world. Understanding the shackles we wear. Before we can fully appreciate freedom, we need to understand what holds us captive. The shackles we wear aren't always visible to the naked eye. They don't always make noise when we walk or leave marks on our skin, but they're real and they're heavy. Some people are bound by their past. Every mistake they've ever made plays on repeat in their minds like a broken record. They can't move forward because they're constantly looking backward, weighted down by regret and shame. They tell themselves, "I'm not worthy of anything better because of what I've done." Others are trapped by fear. Fear of failure keeps them from trying. Fear of rejection keeps them isolated. Fear of the future robs them of peace in the present. These invisible chains are so strong that they can paralyze a person completely, keeping them stuck in one place even when the door to freedom stands wide open. Then there are the chains of addiction, to substances, to toxic relationships, to destructive patterns of behavior. These shackles promise pleasure or relief, but deliver only deeper bondage. What starts as a choice eventually becomes a compulsion. And what was supposed to be an escape becomes a prison. Some people wear the chains of other people's expectations. They've spent so long trying to be what others want them to be that they've forgotten who they really are. They're trapped in a life that looks good on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. And perhaps the most insidious shackles of all are the ones we put on ourselves. The limiting beliefs, the negative self-talk, the conviction that we're not good enough, smart enough, or strong enough to be anything more than we are right now. These are the chains that bind humanity. These are the shackles that keep us from experiencing the abundant life we were created to enjoy. The nature of God's freedom. What makes God's freedom different from any other kind of liberation? Why can't we just break free on our own, through willpower, positive thinking, or personal development? The answer lies in the nature of the freedom God offers. Human efforts at freedom often address only the symptoms, not the root cause. We might break one chain only to forge another. We might escape one prison only to build walls around ourselves somewhere else. But when God sets you free, He deals with the source of the bondage. He doesn't just remove the shackles, He transforms the person wearing them. He doesn't just open the prison door, He heals the wounds that made the prison feel safe in the first place. God's freedom is complete. It's not partial liberation or conditional release. It's not probation or parole. It's total, absolute freedom. The Bible tells us, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. That word indeed carries weight. It means truly, genuinely, completely free. This freedom reaches every part of who we are. It frees our minds from destructive thought patterns. It frees our hearts from the weight of guilt and shame. It frees our wills so we can make choices that lead to life rather than death. It even frees our understanding, opening our eyes to see ourselves and our circumstances from God's perspective, rather than from the limited viewpoint of our pain. God's freedom is also permanent. It's not a temporary high that wears off, requiring us to seek another fix. When God breaks the chains, they're broken for good, as long as we don't willingly put them back on. The process of liberation, freedom from God, isn't usually instantaneous. Even though the decision to accept it can be made in a moment, it's often a process, a journey from bondage to liberty that happens step by step. The journey begins with awareness. You can't be freed from something you don't recognize as bondage. Many people live in chains for years without realizing they're not free. They think, this is just how life is, or this is just who I am. The first step toward freedom is recognizing that you're bound, acknowledging the chains and admitting that you can't break them on your own. This requires humility, which isn't always easy. We like to think we're in control, that we can handle our problems ourselves. But true freedom begins when we stop pretending we're fine and start admitting we need help. The next step is surrender. This is where many people stumble. Surrender sounds like defeat, but in God's kingdom, it's actually the pathway to victory. When we surrender our will to God, when we stop fighting Him and start trusting Him, we position ourselves to receive what He wants to give us. Surrender means saying, God, I can't do this on my own. I need you. I give you my past, my present, and my future. I give you my pain, my shame, and my fear. I trust you to do what I cannot do. Then comes the breakthrough, the moment when God moves in power and the chains begin to break. Sometimes this is dramatic and instantaneous. Other times it's quiet and gradual. But there always comes a moment when you realize something has shifted, something has changed, and you're not who you used to be. But liberation doesn't end with the breaking of chains. There's also a process of healing and restoration. When you've worn shackles for a long time, they leave marks. Your mind needs to be renewed. Your heart needs to be healed. Your identity needs to be rebuilt on the foundation of who God says you are, rather than what your past says about you. This is why freedom is often a journey, rather than a single event. The chains might break in a moment, but learning to walk without them, learning to live as a free person, takes time. Living as a free person. One of the most challenging aspects of freedom is learning to live in it. It's possible to be set free and yet still act like a prisoner. Think about it. If you spent years living in a small cell, your movements would become restricted. You'd get used to limited space. And if someone suddenly removed the walls, you might still move as though they were there. You might still think like a prisoner, even though you're no longer in prison. This is why the Bible talks so much about renewing your mind. Freedom isn't just about changed circumstances. It's about a changed perspective. It's about learning to see yourself the way God sees you, not as damaged goods, not as a hopeless case, not as defined by your worst moments, but as His beloved child, created with purpose, filled with potential, and completely forgiven. Living as a free person means making different choices. When fear whispers, you can't, freedom declares, with God, I can. When shame says, you're not worthy, freedom responds, I am made worthy through Christ. When the past tries to drag you back, freedom enables you to say, "That was then, this is now. I am a new creation." It also means helping others find freedom. One of the most beautiful things about being set free by God is that your story becomes a source of hope for others still in chains. When people see that you were once bound, but now you're free, it gives them faith that they can be free too. Living free means refusing to pick up the chains again. This is crucial. Just because God breaks the shackles doesn't mean you can't put them back on. Freedom is a gift, but it's also a choice you make every day. You choose to walk in the truth rather than the lies. You choose to trust God rather than fear. You choose to forgive rather than harbor bitterness. The evidence of true freedom. How do you know when someone has truly been set free by God? What does that freedom look like in real life? First, there's peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of calm in the midst of them. When God sets you free, you stop being controlled by your circumstances. You can face challenges without falling apart because you know who holds your future. There's also joy, a deep, abiding joy that's different from temporary happiness. This joy doesn't depend on everything going right. It flows from knowing you're loved by God, that your sins are forgiven, and that your life has meaning and purpose. Freedom brings authenticity. When you're no longer trying to hide your past or pretend to be something you're not, you can be genuinely yourself. You can be honest about your struggles without being defined by them. You can acknowledge your weaknesses without being ashamed of them, because your identity is rooted in God rather than in your performance. You'll also notice increased capacity for love. Hurt people, but healed people heal people. When God frees you from your own pain, you have more capacity to care about others' pain. You become more compassionate, more patient, more kind. Purpose becomes clearer. When you're bound by chains, you can't see very far ahead. But when God sets you free, you begin to understand why you're here and what you're meant to do. Your life takes on direction and meaning. And perhaps most significantly, there's transformation. The habits that once controlled you lose their grip. The thoughts that once tormented you lose their power. The fears that once paralyzed you lose their hold. You become someone you barely recognize, in the best possible way. The enemy of freedom. It's important to understand that there's an enemy of your freedom. The Bible calls him the accuser, the deceiver, the father of lies. His entire goal is to keep people in bondage. He does this through deception. He whispers lies that sound like truth. You're too far gone. You've done too much. God could never forgive that. You're beyond help. This is just who you are. These lies become chains when we believe them. He also uses shame as a weapon. Shame tells you that you're not just someone who did something bad, but that you are bad. Fundamentally, irredeemably bad. Shame keeps people hiding in the shadows, too afraid to come into the light where healing and freedom can be found. Fear is another tool in his arsenal. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of being hurt again. These fears build walls that become prisons. But here's the truth. The enemy has no real power over someone who belongs to God. He's already defeated. His weapons only work when we give them power by believing his lies. When God sets you free, you're no longer under the enemy's authority. Yes, he'll still try to discourage you, distract you, and drag you back. But he can't actually force you back into bondage. The shackles can't hold you anymore, because you belong to someone greater, someone stronger, someone who has already won the victory. Stories of liberation. Throughout history, countless people have experienced the liberating power of God. Their stories are testimonies to the truth that when God sets you free, the shackles truly can't hold you anymore. Consider the woman caught in adultery, dragged before Jesus by religious leaders who wanted to stone her. She was bound by shame, by her past, by the condemning voices around her. But Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." In that moment, the chains of shame and condemnation fell away. She was free, not free to continue in sin, but free from the penalty and power of it. Think about the Apostle Paul, who spent the early part of his life persecuting Christians, approving of their deaths, and hunting them down. If anyone should have been disqualified from ministry, it was him. But when he encountered Jesus, everything changed. God set him free from his past and used him to write much of the New Testament and establish churches throughout the known world. His past became a testimony rather than a prison. Consider people in our own time, those who've been freed from decades of addiction, whose families have been restored, whose lives have been completely turned around. There are people who've been freed from the chains of bitterness after unthinkable tragedy, who've chosen forgiveness and found peace. There are those who've been liberated from crippling anxiety and depression, who've discovered that God can heal minds and hearts as surely as He can heal bodies. These stories aren't fairy tales. They're real testimonies of real people who encountered a real God who offers real freedom. The invitation to freedom. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in the descriptions of bondage, if you know you're wearing chains but you don't know how to break free, there's good news. The same God who has set countless others free is offering that same freedom to you. It doesn't matter what your chains are made of. It doesn't matter how long you've worn them. It doesn't matter how tightly they seem to bind you. God specializes in breaking chains. He delights in setting captives free. The invitation is simple, but it requires a response. You can't be set free by God without surrendering to God. You can't experience His liberation while still insisting on your own way. It starts with a prayer, not a fancy religious prayer, but an honest conversation with God. Tell Him about the chains. Admit you can't break them yourself. Ask Him to do what only He can do. Trust that He hears you and that He's already moving on your behalf. Then take the next step. This might mean reaching out for help, talking to a pastor, joining a support group, or connecting with other believers who can encourage you on the journey. Freedom is rarely found in isolation. It's usually discovered in community. It means spending time with God, reading His Word, which the Bible calls truth that sets us free, and talking to Him regularly. It means learning who He is and who you are in Him. And it means being patient with the process. Remember, the chains might break quickly, but learning to walk in freedom is a journey. There will be moments when you're tempted to doubt, to give up, to believe the old lies again. In those moments, hold on to the truth. If God has set you free, you are free indeed. The shackles can't hold you anymore. Conclusion: walking in freedom. When God sets you free, everything changes. The chains that once defined you become part of your testimony. The prison that once confined you becomes a memory of God's delivering power. The shackles that once held you become evidence that God can do the impossible. You're no longer who you were. You're no longer bound by what bound you. You're a new creation, with a new identity, a new purpose, and a new future. This doesn't mean life will suddenly be perfect, or that you'll never face challenges again. But it means you face those challenges as a free person rather than a captive. It means the things that once controlled you no longer have that power. It means you walk through life with your head held high, not because of who you are in yourself, but because of whose you are. When God sets you free, the shackles can't hold you anymore. This is more than a nice saying. It's a spiritual reality. The chains are broken. The prison door is open. The way forward is clear. The question is, will you walk through that door? Will you accept the freedom God is offering? Will you choose to live as the free person He's made you to be? The invitation stands. The door is open, and the one who breaks chains is calling your name. Freedom awaits. And when God sets you free, nothing, absolutely nothing, can put those shackles back on, unless you allow it. You are free indeed.